been accused of being too close to Google amid growing anger at the company's £130 million back tax deal. Former Business Secretary Vince Cable said earlier this week that Google had a great deal of influence in number 10 under the coalition. Even Rupert Murdoch got in on the act, accusing the, and I quote, posh boys in Downing Street of being in awe of Google. No one in Downing Street, of course, has ever been in awe of the posh Aussie Rupert Murdoch. Steve Hilton, who used to be David Cameron's strategy chief, says there needs to be much greater scrutiny of how big firms lobby government.
Do I appreciate the anger? Yes, I very much do. I think that there is a growing sense of the sense of companies that are so big and so dominant in their not just in the marketplace, but in the way they relate to governments and their lobbying efforts and so on, that they really are above the law. And I think that although in this particular case, I think they've made clear that they were abiding by the law then when the arrangements caused anger, and now when they've got the new arrangements. The truth is that those of us who really believe in the power of business and capitalism to do good things for society, and I'm definitely one of those people, we've really got to make clear to businesses that they have a responsibility to behave in a way that earns public trust.
That was Steve Hilton. Join me now, Iain Anderson, Chairman of the lobbying group, Cicero Group. He also chairs the Association of Professional Political Consultants, which represents lobbying companies. There's nothing new in the idea that big companies get to lobby governments and that governments can often be too close to big companies. So can oppositions be too close to them. But what are we going to do about it?
Well, the government's lobbying register, Andrew, is not the answer to where we are right now. It's a completely failed concept. In our view, the APPC, it covers about 1% of the actual lobbying that's taking place. You know what? Google don't like me, don't actually have to be on this register. So the government's plans that were hatched up under the coalition don't solve any of this. What we want to see is full disclosure of ministerial diaries. That, frankly, gets rid of any perceived problem. You can see big companies, small companies, charities, trade unions. You can see who's meeting.
But surely we know something of the diaries. Isn't that why we know there's been 21 meetings with Google? We just don't know what happened at them.
Well, we don't know what happened at them, and again, we're calling for better disclosure, much more robust disclosure. And if you look department by department, they're all at 6s and 7s as to who actually makes timely declaration of who's having these meetings.
But it's never really the meeting with the minister that decides things. It's all the endless meetings and lunches and breakfasts and parties between special advisors and other people and the big companies. That's where the what you would call the Sherpa work is done.
And you know what? Again, the government's lobbying register completely fails because it doesn't require me or Google or any other company to declare when it's meeting a special advisor. All you have to declare is whether or not you've met a minister or whether you've met a permanent secretary. And by the way, I'm meeting permanent secretaries. I don't think I met one permanent secretary last year. I'd like to challenge what Steve Hilton was saying, though, just at the end of that package, because no professional lobbyist that I know, Andrew, lobbies about a company's tax bill. That's the job of the people who are not in this chair today, the accountants and the tax advisors. So I want to kind of clear up that lobbyists are trying to change people's tax rules or tax bills themselves. That's simply not true.
No, it isn't. Don't you do that when you take HMRC to lunch?
Well, I don't take HMRC to lunch.
No, but you get my point.
And I don't think HMRC are happy to be lunched in that way. Again, the current regime that we've got doesn't work, and frankly, actually, we now need not just new lobbying rules, but we need some new corporate tax and personal tax rules, because the system's far too complicated.
The lobbying's a bit of a mess in this country, isn't it?
It is, but they lobbied brilliantly on that register, and which is why it's so weak and special advisors.
Only 119 companies on it, only 2 law firms.
That's right, and most of them are lobbying, but they're off. And I've read menus in bars that are more detailed than this lobbying register.
He's read a lot of menus in bars.
And they've done it fantastically. You're never going to end it all together. And I think there's nothing wrong with ministers and special advisors meeting people but you want that transparency. You want to know
Precisely.
they've met, and that's not going to solve everything, of course. We're going to have to keep on moving and keep trying to pin them down. But you could go a lot further than we have already.
For me, I think the issue is actually, there's nothing intrinsically wrong or immoral or dodgy about people lobbying. Trade unionists lobby, head teachers lobbying, lots of different
Media
groups representing
companies
different
lobby.
If they got more legislation around them, though,
well, yeah, but
Yeah.
the key thing is the more you try and regulate this in this sort of way, what will happen is exactly what happened since the Freedom of Information laws, is that you get government by post-it note. Ministers don't have a formal meeting in their office with the lobbyists. They'll be directed to chat to them at a cocktail party, and then there's no record of it whatsoever. This will happen anyway. The key thing, I think, is taking money out of politics. If people who are lobbying cannot offer funds towards political parties or campaigns because that's not allowed, I think then you have actually got a chance of cleaning things up.
Ministers or politicians of all parties, they love to be thought that they're with the zeitgeist. And cozying up to Google when Google was a brave new world.
Labour did it.
Apple, Labour, Amazon.
Yeah.
They don't spend much time with the widget company in West
pig
Birmingham.
farmers.
You know, my hardest tasks are working for new entrants. We work for lots of new entrants, people who are trying to get in to disrupt the market. Now, at one point, Google was a market disruptor. At one point, Facebook was a market disruptor. But in a way, not now. And in a way, this debate actually is a bit of a mirage from the debate that really should be taking place, which is, are the corporate tax rules in this country fit for purpose?
But they're less likely to go after these companies when they're forever having a glass of Prosecco and a nibble with him. They're going around the offices. They're in and out of each other's, restaurants. That's what happens.
And that's why you want the transparency.
Yeah, but you also want to just push them away.
We can all have our own views on the settlement that has come by with Google. And we know that there was this 20-odd meetings between Google and ministers. It's still, people are making the connection, but it's still not shown that these meetings had anything to do with Google's tax returns.
No, you're quite right on that. We haven't seen the figures. I understand personal privacy and taxation affairs. I don't believe it should apply to big corporations.
No.
I'd like to see those ballpark figures. But you're quite right. But it creates this atmosphere where you become very chummy, where all of a sudden ministers, opposition parties...
And the social mixing.
Exactly. And look, HMRC inspectors like to go after the big avoiders, as they say. That's what they do. It's like red meat to them. They want to win those battles. But they won't feel they have ministers on their side if they're always being pally-pally with companies like Google.
Or if the Prime Minister's former communications advisor was working for Google for many years.
Huge movement between in and out. Though it also happens on the Guardian side in another way as well. But wouldn't it allay a lot of suspicions if, we don't need to see the massive detail of a big corporation's tax return, but if foreign multinationals operating and making money in this country were forced to publish the revenues that they generated in this country, the profit that was generated in this country, as identified by and agreed with HMRC, and then the tax they paid.
Andrew,
3 lines would give us all a fair idea if things were being fair or
Andrew,
not.
and this is the ridiculous thing about George Osborne heralding this as a great deal. He announced this as a great deal just as what you're talking about was agreed at an international level by the OECD, that will be country by country reporting of tax deals. You know what? This Google tax, as we found out this morning, doesn't even capture Google. There's something wrong with the tax system. That's the real story.
We shall leave it there. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Ian.
Now, a new national